If you are still holding out hope for a joyous, tear-filled miracle baby delivery for Portia Robinson and Curtis Ashford this week, I am here to tell you to prepare for a brutal, soul-crushing heartbreak. For those of us who have watched this show through decades of tragedy, we know the signs. The writers have been painting a picture of domestic bliss just waiting to be shattered, and if my instincts are right, the impending birth is not going to be a celebration. It is going to be a nightmare. We all want to see a happy legacy family expanding, but in Port Charles, happiness is usually just the calm before the storm. The stage is being set for a devastating loss, one that will rip through the canvas and leave nothing but devastation in its wake. If you think this is just another dramatic hospital dash, you have not been paying attention to the shadows lurking in the corners of this storyline. Let us look at the facts we already know from the canvas. Portia Robinson is heavily pregnant, and the stress is mounting to an unbearable degree. We have seen her pushed to the absolute brink recently, clashing fiercely with Jordan Ashford and dealing with Trina Robinson demanding space. The domino effect begins the moment those agonizing labor pains hit her, not safely within the sterile, secure walls of General Hospital, but isolated and vulnerable in her own home. Imagine the sheer terror of that moment. The first domino falls when Curtis Ashford, the father of her child and her supposed protector, is nowhere to be found. We know Curtis is drowning in his own legal nightmare, contemplating plea deals, and facing a potential civil lawsuit from none other than Isaiah Gannon. Curtis being absent during the most critical moment of Portia's life is the catalyst for the tragedy I see coming. It is the perfect storm of bad timing and misplaced priorities, leaving a pregnant woman entirely defenseless against the cruel twists of fate. Just when Portia is screaming in agony, completely desperate and alone, the second domino tips over. Who walks through the door? Dr. Isaiah Gannon. At first glance, this seems like an absolute godsend. To the untrained eye, having a highly skilled, brilliant surgeon arrive during a medical emergency is the ultimate stroke of luck. The audience is supposed to breathe a collective sigh of relief, thinking, thank goodness a doctor is finally here. But if you ask me, this is where the hidden agenda truly begins. Isaiah is not there to be a savior. He is the wolf at the door, disguised in the comforting authority of the medical profession. I suspect this seemingly fortuitous arrival is actually the beginning of a deeply manipulative scheme designed to break Portia down to her absolute core, stripping away everything she holds dear. Here is where the theory takes a distinctly dark and sinister turn, venturing into the realm of psychological horror. Isaiah is a top-tier medical professional. He knows human anatomy inside and out, he knows crisis management, and as a physician, he certainly knows the fundamental mechanics of how to deliver a baby in a pinch. Yet, what if he suddenly plays dumb? Picture this agonizing scene. Portia is writhing in pain, begging for his help, her life and her baby's life hanging in the balance, and Isaiah looks her dead in the eye and claims he has no idea how to deliver a child. He might say his specialty is strictly surgical, feigning absolute incompetence in obstetrics. To those of us who know better, this excuse is entirely unbelievable. Like, a doctor of his caliber freezing up during a basic biological process? It is a calculated, malicious lie. He is deliberately choosing not to act, watching the clock tick down as Portia's complications multiply and her panic reaches a fever pitch. The vicious cycle of manipulation deepens as Isaiah systematically cuts off all avenues of rescue for the desperate mother. Portia will undoubtedly beg him to call an ambulance, to call her colleagues at General Hospital, to call Curtis. But I am willing to bet Isaiah will pull out his phone and claim the battery is completely dead, or that there is miraculously no cell service in the house. In a modern world, in a well-connected residence in Port Charles, this is a glaring, terrifying red flag. Instead of running next door to a neighbor, or using a landline, or simply putting Portia in his car and speeding to the emergency room, he will do the unthinkable. He will tell a terrified, laboring Portia that he has to leave her alone to go find help, effectively abandoning her when she needs him the most. Leaving a woman in active, complicated labor alone is a death sentence for the unborn child, and Isaiah knows this with absolute, chilling certainty. By walking out that door, he is ensuring that the third domino falls, the tragic, entirely preventable loss of the baby. He will take his time, perhaps pacing outside in the shadows or driving aimlessly around the block for just long enough to guarantee that the window for a safe delivery closes permanently. When he finally returns, bursting through the door playing the breathless, frantic hero who tried his absolute best, it will be far too late. The tragedy will have already struck. Portia will be shattered, physically broken, and mourning the loss of the child she desperately wanted, all while her supposed savior wears a mask of deep, fabricated sympathy, hiding his true, monstrous nature. If this tragedy unfolds, as I suspect, the fallout will be catastrophic, destroying a legacy family from the inside out and leaving deep scars across the canvas. Portia's overwhelming grief will rapidly morph into a blinding, all-consuming rage. And who will be the primary target of that unyielding fury? Curtis Ashford? The fourth domino falls directly on the foundation of their marriage. Portia will blame Curtis entirely for not being there. She will scream that if he had not been so wrapped up in his legal battles, if he had not been distracted by his own pride and past mistakes, their baby would still be alive. The guilt will eat Curtis alive, pushing him to the brink of despair, but Portia's resentment will be an impenetrable fortress. Their marriage, already heavily fractured by years of secrets and lies regarding Trina's paternity, will shatter into a million irreparable pieces, leaving no hope for reconciliation. With Curtis pushed entirely out of the picture, banished to the outskirts of Portia's life, the path is perfectly cleared for Isaiah's ultimate manipulative scheme to take root. The fifth domino is Isaiah smoothly stepping into the massive emotional void left by Curtis's exile. He will position himself as the only person in the world who truly understands Portia's profound pain. He was there, after all. He was the one who tried to save her when her husband abandoned her. He will become her indispensable emotional crutch, the strong, silent shoulder for her to cry on during her darkest nights. He will listen patiently to her vent her hatred for Curtis, subtly validating her anger and stoking the flames of her resentment with perfectly timed words of false comfort. This is classic textbook psychological manipulation. He creates the devastating trauma and then presents himself as the only viable cure for it. As Isaiah weaves his deceptive web tighter around a grieving, vulnerable Portia, we have to step back and ask ourselves, why? What is his ultimate endgame in this twisted scenario? If you ask me, Isaiah is not just a rogue doctor with a sick savior complex. He is a man with a completely blank past, a ghost walking the halls of General Hospital. We know absolutely nothing of his life, his loyalties, or his true motivations before he arrived in Port Charles. In the world of daytime drama, a mysterious past is never just a coincidence. It is a ticking time bomb waiting to detonate. I strongly suspect Isaiah is working for a much darker, hidden organization. A secret syndicate that operates in the very shadows of Port Charles, pulling strings, manipulating lives, and orchestrating medical accidents for their own nefarious gain. Let us expand on this terrifying hidden agenda. What if Isaiah's primary goal is not just to ruin Curtis Ashford's life, but to gain absolute control over Portia's influential position at General Hospital? Portia holds significant power and sway as a co-chief of staff. By breaking her down mentally and emotionally, isolating her from her family, and making her entirely dependent on him for her sanity, Isaiah could easily manipulate hospital policy through her. He could use her clearance to cover up evidence for his shadow organization, grant access to restricted areas, or even orchestrate the downfall of the entire hospital board from the inside. It would be an unholy alliance where Portia, completely blinded by her grief and misplaced trust, becomes an unwitting, tragic pawn in a massive corporate and criminal takeover that threatens the entire town. We also absolutely cannot ignore the glaring irony of Isaiah's current legal maneuvering against the Ashford family. He is already approaching the cunning Rick Lansing to file a civil lawsuit against Curtis for the assault that injured his hand. This impending lawsuit is another calculated, heavy domino waiting to fall. By suing Curtis, Isaiah is financially and legally draining the man, ensuring Curtis has no resources, no reputation, and no energy left to fight for his marriage or uncover the truth. It is a brilliant, multi-pronged attack. Isaiah is destroying Curtis in the unforgiving arena of the courtroom while simultaneously destroying him in the sacred space of his own home. It is a masterclass in villainy, executed with the cold, sterile precision of a seasoned surgeon removing a vital organ. And what about Trina Robinson? How does this devastating domino effect impact the younger generation? Trina is already feeling the immense weight of her family's issues, demanding space from her parents' endless, exhausting drama. But the tragic loss of a sibling and the explosive implosion of her parents' marriage will drag her right back into the center of the emotional wreckage. Trina will be violently torn between her grieving, inconsolable mother and her guilt-ridden, broken father. But Trina is also incredibly perceptive. She has a sharp mind and a strong intuition. While Portia might be utterly blinded by Isaiah's comforting words and gentle demeanor, Trina might start to see the subtle cracks in his carefully constructed facade. If Trina begins to investigate Isaiah's past, asking questions he does not want answered, she could put a massive, deadly target on her own back, and drawing the dangerous ire of whatever dark organization Isaiah is truly working for. The sheer brilliance of this manipulative scheme lies in its absolute, unshakable deniability. No one in Port Charles currently suspects Isaiah Gannon of being a monster. He is a respected doctor, a healer, a man who supposedly suffered a tragic, career-threatening injury at the hands of the volatile Curtis Ashford. The town will naturally rally around him, viewing him as a tragic hero who valiantly tried to deliver a baby under impossible, horrific circumstances. They will pity him for his hand injury and praise his noble character for standing by Portia in her darkest hour. It is the perfect, impenetrable cover. The citizens of Port Charles are so accustomed to looking for villains in the flashy mob families or the clandestine WSB operations that they are completely, dangerously blind to the sociopath operating right out in the open, walking the hospital corridors in plain sight. Of course, we must remember that as of right now, the canvas has only shown us a dedicated, albeit slightly litigious, medical professional. There is no concrete, undeniable proof yet that Isaiah is a cold-blooded operative willing to sacrifice an innocent, unborn child to advance a hidden agenda. But the breadcrumbs are undeniably there, scattered across the narrative, waiting for us to connect them. The sheer convenience of his presence during the emergency, the glaring mystery of his background, the targeted, escalating hostility toward Curtis Ashford, it all points to a man who is playing a much longer, much deadlier game than anyone in Port Charles currently realizes. The writers are setting up a tragedy, and Isaiah is standing perfectly positioned at ground zero. If this dark, twisted theory comes to pass, it will fundamentally alter the emotional landscape of General Hospital for years to come. It will be a storyline steeped in psychological horror, proving once again that the most dangerous, lethal villains do not always carry guns or shout threats. Sometimes, they wear pristine white coats, speak in soothing tones, and offer a comforting embrace when you are at your most vulnerable. Portia Robinson is unknowingly walking into a meticulously laid trap of unimaginable grief, and the man tightly holding her hand is the very one who set the snare. Will she wake up and see the wolf before he devours her family entirely, or is Portia destined to place her ultimate trust in the very man who orchestrated the destruction of her life from the shadows?